I'm Carol, your host today. So today we have Mr. Leung Kai Chi from the Hong Kong Public Opinion Research Institute to talk about the recent findings that you find about the policy address this year. So Mr. Leung, what can you tell me about what's the reason behind the research? Because I found that your research found that it's quite negative, people's feedback towards the policy address this year.
This is a research that has been conducted by, well, first by HKU Pop Center, but now by PORI, that we would have this kind of follow-up opinion polling for the policy address. So right after the policy address, we would have sort of an immediate response for, in that evening, and then we will have a follow-up survey. And if you look at what has happened in the last couple of years, this year seems to be like much worse than before. The immediate response has been very bad, and then 2-3 days later, with more time for people to digest what's going on and also more time for the government officials to explain what's going on, well, people's opinions to the policy address just gone worse. Now we're talking about -62. That's the net satisfaction rate right now. Yeah.
So it seems like people are quite dissatisfied with her policy address this year. So what do you think the trend is telling us about people's opinion on this government? What's the problem with this government?
Well, if you look at the, I think this year policy address is in a rather different context than, well, what we would expect in sort of a normal policy address. That normally for a policy address, it should be like addressing some like broad scale issue that we're looking forward, we're seeing like what's going to happen in the like next couple of years in Hong Kong, and then we would have some kind of policy directions for the future. But this year we have a policy address right in the middle of a social movement. So people actually have an expectation of the government trying to solve the ongoing crisis. Unfortunately, the policy address failed to do it. Okay, so instead of trying to give like some kind of responses to like housing or livelihood issues, but people do understand that we have an immediate political crisis going on. And if you don't address that, then people are just going to lose hope and trust in the government. And I think that's what we are seeing in the essentially collapsing satisfactory rate.
What sort of resolutions that you expect Carrie Lam to set out?
Well, I mean, she has two options. Option number one is always resign, because that's what's going on. I mean, in a normal society, a democratic society with such a low approval rate, I mean, you just simply cannot stay on in the government and try to expect like to win back people confidence in you. Now, other than that, I mean, then the most obvious solution is to try to rebuild confidence in the government, because without that, it doesn't matter what you do. Okay, so she can propose any kind of new policy initiatives. Okay, but it doesn't really matter because people don't trust her anyway. So the first thing she has to do is to rebuild confidence, and we have seen quite a number of opinion polls saying that Hong Kong people don't trust the government and don't trust her. So I would say that's the very first thing she has to do.
So in the coming year, what do you expect from Carrie Lam besides what you've just talked about? Like, how's the prospect of her governance this year?
Well, 1 year is probably too long to talk about like Carrie Lam's administration. People are talking about like whether she can even like survive for like more than like a couple months. So I am not going to comment on that. Instead, I think unless she can have some very like immediate response to the confidence issue of her administration, I don't think her administration can actually last that long.
So besides this Carrie Lam's policy address research, I know that Mr. Leung, you've also initiated We Hong Kongers initiative in the program. And can you tell me more about why would you start this initiative? Because this program is actually letting public citizens to choose what to be asked in the research. Why would you start this?
Well, if you look at academic discussion and research on opinion polls, very often we have this question we have in our mind that opinion polls are very important. They often serve as a tool in agenda setting in news reporting. That because someone like done an opinion poll and therefore you talk about it in the news. So the problem here is that opinion polls are very expensive. So those people who get to set the opinion polls questions often get to set the agenda of the news. So we want to sort of democratize it if we can. We can want to open up that process as well. So people can ask their questions, so they can submit their proposals for questions to be asked in our opinion polls, and through a process of like minimal vetting, and then people can vote on it, and the most supported questions would be included in our next opinion polls. So we want to do that to make sure people's voice can actually get heard, and not just what we want to know, but what people want to know.
So why are you starting this program in this specific, particularly time?
Well, we are in a social movement right now, and we have a lot of questions in people's mind. Actually, for the last couple of months, we have been seeing people asking, hey, if we do this in the movement, would we lose public support? And people have been like essentially wild guessing, right? Or maybe we shouldn't do this, maybe we should do this. Well, instead of guessing, why don't we just ask people, right? So let's open up the platform. We're talking about, well, this is a leaderless movement, right? So why don't we also try out some kind of leaderless opinion poll as well? We open up the platform and let people ask the questions they want to ask, so we can figure out what Hong Kong people are feeling and what they want to do.
But I also have a question in mind, is that you've mentioned that there's why people are not doing this because they have set an agenda, so that it's expensive because it's hard to do such a research. Are you facing such problem?
So we want to open up the process of opinion polling, and so you have two problems that you have to face. Number one is who's going to ask the question. So now we set up an online platform and people can do that, but you still have to fund it. So we are also having a fundraising program. So hopefully people will help us out and give us donations so we can keep running this program for, well, at least a couple of months, and so that people will understand the importance of opinion polling, and we can keep doing this.
I see. Thank you very much.
Thank you.